Once upon a time, in the heart of verdant Tunis, where the scent of jasmine filled the ancient alleys and the voices of students echoed from the mosque circles, in an era when Islamic civilization experienced violent fluctuations between prosperity, while his peers played in the city squares, he found his joy in the company of books and in listening to the conversations of the great scholars who frequented his father's council. In the year 749 Hijri, while Abd al-Rahman was in the prime of his youth, not yet 17 years old, a catastrophe unprecedented in history struck Tunis, the Black Death. He lost his parents, then several of his siblings, and then his teachers and mentors who had been like spiritual fathers to him. He had to rebuild his life and find his place in a new, turbulent world. He plunged into the practical and political arena, realizing that knowledge alone was insufficient to understand the world. One must also engage in experience. His sharp intellect and frankness provoked the resentment of some and the envy of others. He recalled the lessons of his teachers, his experiences in the courts of sultans, and the vicissitudes of time he had witnessed. His creative mind began to reorder ideas, connect events, and search for laws that would explain the apparent chaos in human affairs. He began to plan his great intellectual project, which had long preoccupied him, a book that would explain the movement of history. He faced some criticism and rejection from some of his contemporaries who did not grasp the depth and novelty of his ideas. There, he gained the appreciation of the Mamluk Sultan al-Zahir Saif ad-Din Barku, who was known for his love of knowledge and scholars. Ibn Khaldun was appointed as the Maliki chief judge, a high position that granted him extensive authority in applying Sharia law. However, his strictness and absolute justice, and his refusal to compromise with anyone, did not please some influential figures. He spent the rest of his life in Egypt, dedicated to knowledge. He was a towering figure in the history of human thought, a polymath who combined knowledge and action, theory and practice. He lived a life full of challenges and difficulties, knowing loss, pain, exile, imprisonment, and the vicissitudes of power. Yet, at the same time, he possessed strong determination, an ambitious spirit, and a brilliant mind, which enabled him to overcome those difficulties and achieve great accomplishments. And let them know that the path of knowledge may be full of obstacles, but in the end, it is the noblest path to self-realization and service to humanity, leaving an eternal legacy that illuminates the paths of future generations. His story is the story of a human being who sincerely sought knowledge, believed in the power of intellect and thought, and left an indelible mark on the history of human civilization. His ideas transcended the boundaries of his era and place, becoming an important reference for researchers and scholars in various social and human sciences to this day. Ibn Khaldun is rightly considered the founder of modern sociology and a pioneer in the philosophy of history and writing, revising, correcting, and adding to his books, until he passed away in 1406 CE, leaving behind an invaluable intellectual legacy. He soon resigned from his post, or was dismissed, to return to what he loved and excelled at, teaching and writing, and encourages research, even if that freedom must be wrested from the clutches of oppression. It teaches us that challenges and difficulties can be a catalyst for creativity and innovation, and that adversities can bring out the best in a person. Most importantly, it reminds us that humanity, despite its weaknesses and fluctuations, is capable of achieving greatness if armed with knowledge, determination to achieve goals, and an unwavering belief that life has laws that can be understood and interpreted. His analytical and critical approach was strange to those accustomed to traditional historical narratives. The Mongol armies spread terror wherever they went, threatening to destroy civilization. Ibn Khaldun joined a delegation of prominent scholars from Cairo to meet Tamerlane and negotiate with him to save the city from destruction. It was a historic encounter, combining the power of the sword with the power of the mind. But he did not despair and continued to research and write, believing in the value of the beneficial knowledge he offered to humanity. Tamerlane exploited his curiosity and passion for knowledge, seated Ibn Khaldun in his private council, and listened to him as he spoke about the history and affairs of the Maghreb, about his knowledge and thought, and about his theories of human civilization. A long and profound dialogue ensued between them, lasting several days, during which Ibn Khaldun discussed the history of states and peoples, and the rise and fall of civilizations, in a convincing and logical manner. Tamerlane listened attentively, amazed by the vastness of this great scholar's knowledge and the depth of his thinking. This meeting was a triumph of intellect over force, and of wisdom over arrogance. Ibn Khaldun returned safely from this meeting, having impressed Tamerlane, and even succeeded in obtaining some concessions that alleviated the impact of the invasion on Damascus. He saw his role illuminating the path for future generations, even if the value of his light was not recognized in his own era, and elucidate the laws of human civilization, not merely by narrating events, but by analyzing and explaining their causes. Those 2 years in prison were a spiritual retreat that bore the seed of the Muqaddimah. He was accused of machinations and plots and was thrown into a remote prison for 2 years. This period was one of the harshest in his life. He settled in the fortress of Ibn Salama, a secluded castle near Oran in Algeria. Ibn Khaldun was the first to realize that history is governed by laws, and that human societies pass through stages of genesis, prosperity, and decline, just like living organisms. In the introduction to his book, known as the Muqaddimah, he presented new and innovative theories in sociology, history, economics, and politics. He discussed the concept of Asabiya group solidarity and its role in the rise and fall of states, which is the driving force that unites people and pushes them towards achieving common goals. He explained how this Asabiya erodes with luxury and corruption, leading to the weakening and collapse of the state. He also discussed the impact of environment and climate on human temperaments, the laws of social and economic development, and the importance of modern civilization in human life. His ideas were revolutionary for his time, preceding many modern theories in social sciences by many centuries. There, in chosen isolation, far from the noise of cities and the intrigues of courts, he dedicated himself to completing his monumental intellectual project. Days passed as he immersed himself in reading manuscripts, taking notes, and formulating ideas. It took years of strenuous effort, meticulous research, and profound thought until he brought forth his immortal work, Kitbal Ibar, Washington D.W. Ein al-Mubtada Washington al-Kabar Fimal Arab Washington al-Ajam Washington al-Barber Washington Man Karahim Indak al-Sultan al-Akbar. The Book of Lessons record of beginnings and events in the history of the Arabs and Berbers and their contemporaries who were possessors of great authority. In the desolation of the dark cell, beneath the cold walls, he tasted the bitterness of loneliness, oppression, and injustice. Yet, he did not despair. On the contrary, this ordeal transformed into an opportunity for deep contemplation and reflection. Pain wrung his heart, and fear gripped him, yet he clung to a thin thread of hope and began to realize the fragility and transience of life. He served as a private secretary, then an ambassador, then a counselor, then a chamberlain, then a judge. Each position was a new window into a world of challenges and drama. He personally witnessed the rise and fall of states, the alliances and conflicts of rulers, and the loyalty and betrayal of people. He saw how kingdoms were built on tribal solidarity and power, and how they collapsed to luxury and corruption. He observed keenly, analyzed intelligently, and recorded his insightful observations on the nature of governance, society, and human relations. This tragedy was a harsh turning point in his life. It tempered his soul, awakened in him a deep sense of the futility of power and the falsehood of worldly affairs, and pushed him towards seeking a deeper meaning for existence and for laws that would explain this constant fluctuation in human conditions. He saw with his own eyes how societies collapse, how faces change, and how yesterday becomes merely a distant memory. The plague swept through the land like a raging storm, harvesting souls indiscriminately, sparing neither young nor old, rich nor poor. The streets echoed with moans, homes turned into mourning houses, and the dead were buried without count. His wide eyes absorbed every detail, and his keen young mind soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He grew up under the care of the Ibn Khaldun family, who had migrated from Andalusia after the fall of Toledo, carrying with them a legacy of knowledge and prestige, and witnessing the vicissitudes of time. This family heritage, which combined the glory of Andalusia with the wisdom of the Maghreb, instilled in him an early awareness of the movement of history and the cycle of civilizations and decline. A boy was born into a noble house, where the tree of knowledge and authority had flourished for centuries. He was not merely a recipient of knowledge. He debated with his elder teachers with profound questions, revealing a mind that would not accept assumptions. He studied the Holy Quran and its sciences, the noble Hadith and its jurisprudence, and the Arabic language with its treasures of grammar, morphology, and rhetoric. Then he opened himself to the sciences of logic, philosophy, and mathematics, realizing that knowledge was a boundless ocean. He saw in every science a window to a deeper understanding of existence, and in every book a companion that illuminated the paths of darkness. This was in the year 732 Hijri, and his family named him Abd al-Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn Khaldun. From his tender age, Abd al-Rahman was not like other children. Abd al-Rahman approached learning with unparalleled passion. His small fingers traced the pages of ancient manuscripts, and his eyes eagerly followed the Arabic letters. However, fate was not always kind to this brilliant mind. Within a few short days, Abd al-Rahman witnessed with his own eyes how the pillars of his home crumbled. After the black cloud of the plague had lifted, leaving behind desolate cities and shattered souls, Ibn Khaldun found himself alone, but he did not surrender to despair. Ibn Khaldun moved between the courts of princes and sultans in the states of the Maghreb and Andalusia, from Tunis to Fez, from Granada to Bayaya. His political life was never easy. In the court of Sultan Abu Inan al-Marini in Fez, he found himself in a whirlpool of conspiracies and intrigues. In his forced solitude, Ibn Khaldun reviewed the entire tape of his life. After his release from prison, and after a life full of travels and experiences that exhausted his body and enriched his mind, Ibn Khaldun decided to withdraw from the clamor of politics. Kitbe el-Abar was not merely a record of historical events. It was a pioneering attempt to understand history through a new scientific methodology. Ibn Khaldun did not receive full recognition for his works during his lifetime, for he was ahead of his time. In his later years, after completing his intellectual project, Ibn Khaldun traveled to Egypt, which was then a center of knowledge and culture in the Islamic world. In Egypt, Ibn Khaldun witnessed one of the most dramatic events of his life, and perhaps of his era, the arrival of Tamerlane with his massive armies in Damascus. In Tamerlane's council, who was known for his intelligence and thirst for knowledge despite his cruelty, Ibn Khaldun sat calmly and with dignity. Ibn Khaldun returned from Damascus to Cairo safely, but he had grown old, and the years and experiences had exhausted him. Ibn Khaldun departed in body, but his intellectual legacy remained alive, inspiring successive generations. Ibn Khaldun was not merely a name in history books. He was a human being in every sense of the word. The story of Ibn Khaldun teaches us that knowledge thrives only in a free environment that values thought. Let generations be inspired by the story of this exceptional Arab scholar, and let them follow his path full of giving and achievement.